Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this extra special 200th episode, we've got Bears cutting ties with some more familiar faces, a famous Bear retiring, the Blackhawks, not as bad of a spot as we thought they were. But first, we got a special guest. And before that, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. So season is winding down. If you have not gone out to see the Rockford Ice Hogs at the BMO Harris Bank Center, please do so. You will not be disappointed. And you could take your whole family and not break the bank. So head on over to icehogs.com, buy a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. So, Alex, we have a special guest here today.
We do have a special guest here today.
So just as a preface here is our friends at Ball. They retweeted an article, and it was basically an in-depth article about something I was already thinking about, but not nearly as in-depth. He was much more in-depth than I was. An article about, is Zach LaVine the building block for our future? Is he the centerpiece of a building block? So without further ado, I would like to introduce the Bulls outsider, Brandon Pence, Twitter at Bulls Outsider.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So I really liked the article or the video. And it's something that you articulated what I was thinking is I like Zach LaVine. I don't have problems with Zach LaVine, but I don't think they can win a title with him as their number one.
Right. And that's kind of what I was thinking as well. You hear Casey Johnson, and I love Casey Johnson, and you hear him talking about LaVine's the centerpiece of this rebuild, and what does that mean? The names that I don't know if some people have not seen the video. I mean, some of the names that I kind of reasoned that he would eventually average about 20 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists a game. That'd be kind of like an average. And other people in NBA history who have averaged that for a season are like Reggie Miller, who's a Hall of Famer, but then there's like Dale Ellis and Michael Redd and Glenn Rice and Doug Collins and Kiki Vandeweghe and Kevin Martin, Glenn Rice. I mean, just nice players, but they're not like franchise-defining players. So when you hear Casey Johnson saying stuff like, okay, the Bulls see LaVine as this cornerstone of the rebuild, like what exactly does that mean? Is that the best that they're hoping to get? Or is he like going to be their franchise, their star? Because I don't think you can get to the conference finals, much less win a title with him as the franchise player. Lowry Markkanen maybe, but exactly, I just haven't seen it from LaVine. There's just a lot of question marks for me.
Yeah, I mean, the best way I articulated it was is he's a lot like Blake Griffin, where he's a really nice player and it's exciting to watch, but you're never ever gonna put him up against the Beard or Kevin Durant or LeBron James.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like if we're going into the conference finals, a 7-game series with the Cavaliers, for instance, and LeBron's staring across the court, I just don't think LaVine can go toe to toe with him. I think they're going to come up short. And if this is the player that they think they can build around, I think we're going to be disappointed. I think there's an obvious ceiling on that. And yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of an NBA, like a previous comp for him. And the player I keep coming back to is like Gerald Green. It's like you wouldn't build around Gerald Green, and I don't see why they're trying to force the issue and maybe build around Levine. I think he's a good player. I think he's still young. I just don't know if he's that guy that you can build around.
Yeah, and to your point is we saw him go toe-to-toe with Jimmy Butler, and not quite statistically the same numbers, but at least the Bulls got the victory.
Yeah.
But again, that's Jimmy Butler, not Kevin Durant, not LeBron James, not even Kyrie Irving.
Right.
It's the next echelon of tier of players down. So yeah, I agree with you. And so it's really nice to hear because, and hear it statistically, because when you're talking to Bulls fans, is I get it. You're excited about the future of this team, but you can't separate, as of right now, you can't separate any one of those, the new big three, and say that's our cornerstone. You've got to build around all three, because not one of them is not good enough to take you to the promised land.
Not at all. And unless they get some lottery luck, I mean, I don't know where you go from here. Because I mean, outside of the top 5 in this year's draft, the talent pool kind of tails off. So I mean, if you're adding something like Kevin Knox from UK, I mean, he's a nice player, but he's not, with this core, he's not going to make that big of a difference. So it kind of falls back on Levine or Markkanen or even Chris Dunn. And like you said, I don't think you can't build on those guys. I don't think you have to build with them as a core together. And there's just a lot of holes in each of their games, especially defensively for Levine, and Markkanen's been better than we expected, I think, but there's still question marks around them both defensively. And I think there's just a lot of work to do if they're going to build around these three guys. And I don't know if there's enough talent that you can actually pull them in.
And my concern is I recently read a rumor that the Bulls could be interested in bringing former hometown talent Jabari Parker to the team.
Ooh.
And I like Jabari Parker as a player, but man, can you have your 4 best players all be terrible defensively?
No. Defense still matters. And I mean, you look through NBA history that that's why I wrote the Cavaliers off the first year they had Kevin Love, is you have to prove to me on the defensive end. Every NBA champion for the past 40-something years was in the top 10 in offense and defense for the most part, with 2 exceptions, and that was the repeating Rockets and the repeating Shaq Kobe Lakers. Defense matters, and if 4 of your best players can't defend, it's kind of the same problem they have going on in Minnesota with Towns and Wiggins. They got to step up defensively, and you have an obvious ceiling on your team when you can't defend. And not only the defensive end, but Jabari's had a plethora of knee injuries, and Levine had his injury as well. So that would be concerning to me too. I love Jabari Parker as a player, but I just don't know how that would work out.
So the league issued a warning against tanking and the perception of tanking, because it seems like a third of the league is intentionally tanking right now. But to me, I think the Bulls are tanking the right way, because the players on the court and the coach are definitely trying to win, but the front office is tying their shoelaces together every chance they get. So it was absolute genius, as they've said all along that Zach LaVine is not going to play the back end of both games of a back-to-back series. And they just had a back-to-back where game 1 was against the absolutely dreadful Brooklyn Nets, and game 2 was against the Hornets, who are a better team but still not good.
Right.
And normally they play him the first game of the back-to-back and rest him the second. And they did not play him the first and played him the second game, which is just absolutely towing that line. And they're benching Robin Lopez and Holiday. Other than basically playing the entire game with Cameron Payne on the floor. How Alex loves campaign.
I was cheering. I was at the game the other night against the Mavericks, which, by the way, was one of like the worst fundamentally basketball games I've ever been to. When Cameron Payne hit the floor, I pumped my fists and went, "Yeah!" I was really just kind of waiting to see Cameron Payne come in. Not gonna lie,
I love the best part about that game was the Bulls were like, "We're gonna out tank you. We're putting in campaign," and then Mavericks were like, "We're just gonna put 4 players out on the court."
Yeah, they literally put 4 players out there, and they got in trouble for it. And I was talking with my brother. I'm like, is that like worth a penalty? Like, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. It's not like you have 6 players out there. I just thought that was hilarious.
Oh man.
So is there any other ways that the Bulls can tank, Brandon?
Well,
or are they just at their tankingest?
I think that at various points over the next few games that Zach LaVine needs to have some soreness in that knee. Larry Markkanen's back injury is going to have to flare up a little bit. And Chris Dunn, he's just going to have to, twist an ankle and have to sit out. Kind of wink.
Post-concussion headaches?
Yeah, exactly. just to make sure they're on the mend. I think that'd be the most effective way to tank. And then that kind of forces Cameron Payne into the starting lineup and Omar Ashik to actually put on his jersey and get on the court, even though he's washed completely up. So I think there's some ways that they can tank. The funny thing about Cameron Payne, you're talking about him, there's an Iowa State connection that goes back with Cameron Payne. And we all know about Gar and Hoiberg, but there's an Iowa State connection. The Iowa State coach now was his coach at Murray State. So I have no doubt that they were fed info that he was this wonderful, dynamic player back then. And it's unbelievable. He's a bull, especially when they traded him for Taj Gibson and Doug McDermott, 2 decent players. Depending on how you feel about McDermott, but he's obviously just not an NBA player. It's awful to watch him. I mean, if he can get if they can get him 35 minutes in a game, they're going to be well on their way to the number 1 pick. But
you know what? The crazy thing is no matter how many games they lose, they seem to not be able to gain any ground on that top seed.
Everybody else. They're just. I mean, the Mavericks, they've been just openly blunt about it this year. Memphis is pathetic. I mean, there's just some teams that are just hopeless. I mean, there's just the Sacramento Kings. I mean, they've been trying to – this was the year they were supposed to have all these veterans and put it all together, and they just have been terrible again. There's just really, really bad teams. It's hard to tank in today's NBA, I think, because there's so many teams that are just bottoming out.
It's amazing is that the Knicks – They lost by far and away their best player.
Oh yeah,
they stink, and they're still there's no way that they're getting in. They're going to be ninth place or better. There's no way they can get any worse than that because of everybody else is tanking. Dallas, like you mentioned, got fined because they admitted that they're tanking, and they're still only the 3rd worst record.
I'm even looking like Atlanta. They're like 19-44. I can't even believe they won 19 games with that team. Like
20-44.
Oh, 20-44. Did they win today?
Yeah. So now they're a game and a half above Memphis.
Oh my gosh! And they have nobody.
It's funny. You're seeing this effect where there are so many bad teams that no one can get ground on being the front runner bad team. It's because a bad team's going to lose to a bad team and a bad team's going to win against a bad team. There's so much bad that no one can be more bad than everyone else, if that makes sense in a convoluted way.
It's what's crazy is that you've got all these teams that are just bottoming out, and the league doesn't know what to do about it because there's essentially almost a third of the league is intentionally tanking, and then you're going to have a crop of free agents, and nobody's got any money to spend. There's only a handful of teams that have significant cap space.
The Bulls
yeah, the Bulls. Well, the Bulls have so much money.
What they paid.
Well, I mean, what free agents are they even going to sign this year? They're going to extend Bobby Portis probably, extend Zach LaVine, and then they'll probably just sit on the rest of that money because they'll hit the floor.
They might as well. I mean, you're going to be a couple years away anyways from. You should keep rolling the money over. I mean, you spend it wisely on good role players if you feel like you have the core, but depending on what they get with this draft pick, I mean, they could be in a really good position. I'm not on C. Red Fred's train. Shout out to him, but I'm not on his train that we're going to be making the miracle next year. But I think the future is bright. I don't think it's necessarily championship or bust next year, but I think we're going to be well on our way to relevance again. And I think that's a much quicker rebuild than a lot of people thought.
Oh, I mean, I agree with you. They have, as much as I've, crap talked on Garpax.
Well deserved.
They're actually, yes, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of, I don't know if you know the guys from Ball.
Oh yeah,
podcast Ball. C-Red. They do their tournament of trash every year, and just going back and looking at all of the awful decisions that the Bulls have done over the past few years, and you're just like, how is one team this incompetent and still maintains all of their front office staff? But to give them credit, is this rebuild is going well, and so far.
Let's give them credit. I mean, even in 2010, they built a pretty nice team when they had some cap space, and when they brought in Boozer and Oshik at the time, and they just brought in some Ronnie Brewer and those and Corver and all those kind of guys, and they actually built an Eastern Conference contender. I mean, that was a good team until the Rose injury. So I mean, they had some success.
Well, just imagine if Boozer would have been the same Boozer that they thought they were signing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Imagine if they would have gotten LeBron that summer.
Oh man, or even Bosch. I mean,
yeah,
Bosch. That would have been huge. I mean, that would have been amazing too to see him with Rose. I mean, that would have been like the perfect player to put beside him. But yeah, I mean, I think when they've had money, they've done well, and I'm hoping that carries on to the future. But just some of these other moves, I mean, like the Cameron Payne trade, like going back to that, I mean, that was just a dumb move. There's no other way to put it. Signing Wade and Rondo.
Oh,
it just doesn't make any sense at this point in their careers.
Well, I mean, the only thing saving grace you can say about Rondo is all the young players loved him.
Oh yeah, I love Rondo. I just don't. Him and Wade makes sense.
The coaching. Well, I mean, I loved it because he just didn't. He had no problems calling out Wade, and he had no problems calling out Jimmy. But front office hated him. Yeah. The coaching staff hated him. Young players loved him.
And he's.
But the one thing with the Bulls is, I mean, what would be smart is they could see all these teams have no cap space, is to be able to parlay all of their cap space into taking on bad contracts, but taking assets along with it as payment for taking on bad contracts, basically buying draft picks. I mean, that's the only way I can see them making sense with some of the money that they have.
How did you guys feel about the Nico trade when they made that? Did you feel like it was a worthwhile trade to get that Pelicans pick?
I mean, if you think about it, is they turned a guy that before the season started, we thought, all right, well, after the punch, we're like, this is a terrible situation.
Yeah.
And we're just basically gonna have to dump this guy, and turned him into a first-round draft pick.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's as good of a deal as you're going to get. I mean, not only do you get a first-round draft pick, it may not be, obviously a great pick, but it's a first-round pick, and it helps your tank. You get rid of Nico. It helps a lot of things.
I mean, what did you think about it?
I was really surprised they got a first-round pick for him. I thought that they had to move him. Just because, like you said, because of the punch and the situation with Bobby Portis, that was just awkward. Even though they were playing pretty well together, but I was really surprised they actually got a first-round pick. I thought it would actually be more like a high second round from some team that was, or even just a regular, mid-second round or whatever, with a bad contract. I didn't think they were going to get that much for him. And I think he's helped New Orleans a lot. I mean, not to get on the Pelicans talk, but I think they've really seen a resurgence, and he's done some good things for them. And I'm glad we got the first-round pick. I think even though if it's going to be like a mid or late first-rounder, I think there's still rotation players at the end of this draft, if we get it this year, that that could come in and make an impact in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, when they made the trade, the Pelicans were borderline in the playoffs, and now they're like firmly entrenched in the playoff picture. So he's definitely helped them in the standings.
Yeah, they're realistically within shot of getting the third seed in the West. I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility. That's the middle of the West is just a very big logjam. I mean, they could actually get to that third seed, which would be huge for them. They might even win a series at that point if they have a home court advantage for at least a round. So I was okay. I was glad that they got compensation for him that actually seemed fair. I hated to see him go because he was actually playing the best basketball of his career, but you couldn't. There was no way you could just keep him around. He wasn't happy here after all that.
Do you think that the first few years we had him were the enigma, or the first half of this season was the enigma? Like who's the real Nico Mirotic?
I've always said this about Nico. This has always been my thought about him. I think that he's a guy. I'm sure it works in the NBA, but I think he's a guy that needs the ball in his hands to actually be effective. He needs to kind of have the offense ran through him, and you can't run an offense through him in the NBA. But that's how he succeeded in Real Madrid. And I thought we saw more of the real Nico this year when there wasn't Wade and there wasn't Butler and there wasn't Rondo, and he was actually getting the ball and he was able to kind of create and play his game. I think that's the real Nico. Now, who knows if that's going to continue on, but I always thought he was a talented player that was just very misused. And a lot of times they were, Thibodeau and also Hoiberg his first couple of years just kind of had him standing around the three-point line just waiting to catch and launch it up. And I don't think that's him. He has to be in the rhythm of the game, and I don't think he can just like be the Kyle Korver or whoever else. He has to actually be in the flow of the game, and that's when his shooting gets better.
So I've got one last. I don't know if you have any more questions, Alex, but I've got one more.
Sure.
Where do the Bulls? What's your idea for a plan to move the Bulls forward in a quest to compete with LeBron for a chance to lose to the Golden State Warriors?
Yeah, I think I would be making a trade with the Lakers to clear up as much cap room as possible for them. No, I'm just kidding. Just get him out of the conference. Get LeBron out of the conference. I think they have to find an actual franchise player, and I don't know if that's going to happen this draft. If they don't get in the top 5 of this draft, I'm afraid they're going to have to wait till either somebody comes available in free agency. There's nobody really exciting this free agency class that I've noticed. Besides, LeBron and Durant they're just going to stay where they're at, or LeBron's going to go somewhere else, not Chicago. I think until you find that franchise player, you just have to keep putting pieces in place. And I think that's what – I think Dunn's a piece. I think Levine kind of maligned him a little bit, but I think he's a great scorer. I think he's a piece on a championship team. I don't think he's the piece. I think Markkanen could either be an alpha or a step below an alpha, depending on how he develops. I think there's pieces there. I think even Valentine's a piece. I think I like his game. I like Portis has shown me a lot more this year, and I've been surprised by him. But just continue to compile these pieces to when you do get that franchise player that you're ready to roll. And I think that the Bulls are well on their way to doing that. But I think they just need that one game changer. And whoever that might be, hopefully it'll come soon.
All right. Well, I really want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank the Bulls outsider, Brandon Pence. You can check him out on Twitter at Bulls Outsider. So thanks you so much, Brandon, for being on the show.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Take care.
All right. Well, that was great to have a guest. That was Brandon Pence from the Bulls Outsider, Twitter at Bulls Outsider, for some Bulls talk. And Alex, we're going to have your brother on sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was nice to meet him when we had the live show at Peace. He seemed like a cool guy. So love to have him on sooner rather than later. So we'll have to make that happen.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk to him. He goes on shows all the time. In fact, I don't know if I told you, but he's been on TV with Jared Payton.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
So we got the Bulls talk out of the way. You want to talk Bears or baseball?
Why don't we save baseball for last?
All right. So first I want to say, I don't know if everybody knows this, but Matt Forte the other day announced he is retiring. I love Matt Forte. I thought he was an absolutely fantastic Chicago Bear, did a lot of great things and was a class act. And I think as much as I hated seeing him go, the Bears did the right thing at the right time because his career really went downhill with the Jets. But he's going to be remembered as one of the great all-time Bears players, and I hope that they give him a chance to sign the one-day contract.
So do I. I was actually just thinking about that the other day. I think he definitely deserves it because I kind of wrote the retirement. Obviously, you don't want to call it an obituary because he didn't die, but like the reflection of his career. And you just look at the statistics. I mean, as a Bear in 8 seasons, he rushed for nearly 9,000 yards and he received a little over 4,000. I mean, those are some really good numbers right there.
Yeah, I mean, he's got fantastic numbers, and his overall, like not just his rushing, but the pass catching. I mean, you can't really quantify this, but his blocking ability. He was a hell of a run or a pass blocker when he was in the passing downs. He was just a really, really good all around back.
Yeah, I mean, he had all the tools that you want because I love Jordan Howard to death, but he can't catch. That's something, if he wants to work on that, he really is going to need to work on that. And I know these rumors were kind of debunked, but that's kind of why you saw those rumors yesterday with the whole Dolphins trade thing. And it's like, well, I kind of get where they're coming from, even though I love Jordan Howard. But I mean, going back to Matt Forte, he had the ability to catch all the way. And you look at his touchdown totals, 19 of his total offensive touchdowns as a Bear were receiving.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy in his prime that Matt Nagy would have loved to have had for his team because he would have just utilized him as a weapon. I mean, with Tariq Cohen and in his prime Matt Forte, Matt Nagy would be salivating.
Tell me this, without looking at any statistics, I don't know if you are, you aren't, what do you think his best year was?
2013?
That's right. He rushed for the most yards of any season, 1339. He had his top year in value judged by Pro Football Reference, approximate value, they call it. I don't know how much stock you put into that, but it was a career high 15. In terms of receiving yards, it wasn't his top, but he still had 594, 3 touchdowns, and just really had a good year that year. But you look at that's one of his best years. You look at basically from 2008 to 2014, he was pretty consistent in production.
Yeah, and the Bears actually, I mean, like I said, sad to see him go, but it was a very Patriots move. Is they let him go a year or two, or probably a year or two too early rather than a year or two too late.
Yeah, I can see that.
He really fizzled out with the Jets, and I mean, part of it is the Jets are a bad team. Part of it is running backs at that age, they run out of steam. I mean, look how quickly Adrian Peterson, who's first ballot Hall of Famer, arguably the best running back ever. And look how quickly he hit a wall.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like 30 is kind of the life expectancy of a running back. Once you get past that 30 mark, unless you're like a freak of nature, like some greats in history, that's usually kind of when you hit your wall. Because Matt Forte, even his last year as a Bear, 898 rushing yards, 389 receiving yards. It's definitely a step down, but he played in 13 games as opposed to 16, but he was still doing pretty good. And then, yeah, like you said, he hit the Jets, and then things really kind of started to nosedive. I mean, last year, he only started in 4 games. He played in 12, but he only started in 4. So it's really not surprising that he's retiring. I was kind of expecting it. But you see what he did with the Jets, and the fact that he passed the 30 mark after leaving Chicago, you knew he didn't have much longer to play in the NFL.
But I'm glad you brought up the Jordan Howard situation, because that was a topic I wanted to go to. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know, Jarvis Landry, the slot receiver from the Dolphins, was slated to hit free agency. And the Dolphins decided to place a franchise tag on him. And not because they want him, they don't want him, but they are hoping to recoup some sort of compensation for him leaving. But here's the thing, before we even get into the trade rumors, is Jarvis Landry being tagged as a free agent, or as a tagged with the franchise tag. It's like $16 million for the franchise tag for the 1 year at wide receiver. And you don't prorate that like you do with signing bonuses over a certain amount of years. All 16 million go right on your salary cap. And the Dolphins are pretty much, I don't know if they can afford to have a $16 million cap hit, especially after they just traded for Robert Quinn. I mean, I would play chicken with them, because they're going to have to rescind that at some point, because they can't afford it, or offer something lowball. And I also don't understand, because once he signed, he leaves and he signs somewhere else, they're going to get a compensatory pick for Jarvis Landry, and you expect it's probably going to be pretty decent because he's going to sign a big contract. So I think the Dolphins are being a little greedy here.
Yeah, the whole thing with me is, like you said, the whole salary cap thing. Everyone knows that they really don't have any wiggle room there, so there's a lot of scratching of heads, but it kind of tells me that they're planning on doing something. And these rumors that came up yesterday, Rappaport pretty much shut a lot of it down, saying the Bears weren't really interested in trading Howard, but they were somewhat believable rumors because, like I said, I love Jordan Howard. You know, he's had 2 1,000-plus rushing yard seasons in his 2 years in the NFL. He was a Pro Bowl his rookie year. But, you know, Matt Nagy's going to be a very pass-heavy guy. It's his system. And Jordan Howard, like I said, can't really catch the ball. I mean, we saw the past 2 years where he had passes thrown to him that he flat-out dropped so that he should have caught. Probably the most notable one was in week 1 last year. He should have caught the game-winning touchdown, but he didn't. So I would understand why a trade like that would be explored. Because when you get a new coach, you'll see, especially in the NFL more than anything, you will see teams make trades and adjustments to add players that fit a certain scheme. You could also argue the same in basketball, but for the NFL, if it's a certain offensive scheme, then yeah, your coach may have to force some roster changes here. So that's why it didn't really surprise me that much.
Yeah, and just to fill out the whole story, is the rumor was that the Bears would send Jordan Howard and a later pick to the Dolphins and swap first round picks with them. So the Bears would give them the number 8 pick and they would take the number 11 pick and would get Jarvis Landry and a 3rd round pick. And I mean, the thing about it is, the thing that made it believable, it was not the the part where they're like, oh, well, Matt Nagy wants a pass catching receiver. I get that part. I mean, I'll talk about that more in a minute, but the thing that really made it believable was, well, they'd get that extra third round pick that they're missing back. And I could see Ryan Pace wanting to get that third round pick back. And I was like, maybe that's sort of believable, but I'm like, I think that's way too much to give up for Jarvis Landry, especially when you're going to have to negotiate a long-term contract with him. And here's the thing about Jarvis Landry. I get it. He's a Pro Bowl receiver and he makes a lot of catches. But if you look at his average yards per catch, he's at the bottom of the league. It's terrible. He just catches a lot of short passes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's not a number one wide receiver. So if you sign him, fine. I mean, because you're going to add Cam Meredith and maybe a draft pick or another free agent, but you can't have him be your number one receiver and be successful. But my thing with the Jordan Howard is, I get it. Matt Nagy would love to have Jordan Howard be a dynamic pass catcher, and he's just a terrible pass catcher. He's not even like a man pass catcher. Jordan Howard's got stone hands.
He has one touchdown, one receiving touchdown in 2 years. Let's just put it that way simply.
But my thing about it is, Jordan Howard is a really, really good running back. Mm-hmm. And I think if you trade him away, it's a nut because he doesn't quite fit your system. It's gonna come back and bite you, and it's gonna be another situation that the Bears did the same thing, and it came back to bite them. Was when they traded away Greg Olsen.
And I'm still pissed about that.
They traded him away because the offensive coordinator couldn't find a way to use one of the best pass catching tight ends of our, the last 10 years. And they couldn't find a way to use him. And I think Matt Nagy is a smart enough head coach to say, I can use a guy like Jordan Howard. He might not be the ideal guy I want, but he's damn good and we can use him. That's my thought. And Matt Nagy has said, you've got to coach to the strength of the players you have, not force players into the system you have. And that's where I thought it was bunk, and I was glad it got debunked.
Overall, I was too, because even though I understood the idea of trading for something that fits your system, like I said, and I get that he's a terrible catcher, but he's so talented at what he does do well. And I think my biggest thing was, the trade didn't seem to make much sense. I'm like, okay, if you're going to make this trade, then you're going to need to do a better job getting the draft picks, because I think that would have been not a good trade in that scenario. And two, I just feel like at the end of the day, even though, yes, I understand you want guys that fit your system, trading away a talent like Jordan Howard, that's just going to create another hole that you already had filled, even though the system isn't quite the same. So I think that Jordan Howard will be used, strictly to just pound the ball through, because let's face it, even though he's going to go to a pass-heavy offense, you're going to need to just pound the ball through, and that's what Jordan Howard's going to give you. What's also kind of exciting about this is, you want to talk about a running back that could catch? We have one. His name's Tariq Cohen. You have one right there. So what would be nice to see, and what I think we are going to see, is a better balance of these two backs in Matt Nagy's system. Not John Fox BS, none of that crap where you don't see Tariq Cohen do anything for a while, and then suddenly you use him, and then suddenly he's gone, and then you pound Jordan Howard until he's like dead and in the ground. You're going to see a lot more balance. And because Jordan Howard doesn't fit the traditional Nagy system, that is going to create the balance, because he's going to create more specific times for him, times where Jordan Howard does succeed, and then we'll use Tariq Cohen for his special needs. So I think that balance is going to really help things out. I really do.
The only way I would be okay with the Bears getting rid of Jordan Howard right now is if somebody could guarantee me that the Bears would draft Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, because that
I don't know if
guy's kind of a freak.
Yeah, did you see his combine numbers?
My God, that defies nature.
Wait. So to put it in comparison is if you look just at his sprint times, it was faster than Devin Hester was at his combine. If you look at the quickness drills, he was quicker than Deshaun Jackson, who is noted as one of the quickest guys in the NFL. And his bench press, of the number of times he bench pressed 225 pounds, was more than future Hall of Fame, possibly best left tackle in the history of NFL, Joe Thomas, did when he was in the combine. Oh, and he had the highest vertical out of any running back since at least 1989. That includes Barry Sanders, Thurman Thomas, Emmitt Smith. The guy is a freak of nature. It's unreal.
And what's amazing is the way the whole football world was just in awe by it. It's like what you just said is what everyone's been saying. You're comparing this kid and his combine numbers to all these greats. And you're not just comparing him to one great, you're comparing him to all these greats in these certain categories. So it's almost like you took a little bit from one great, another little bit from another great, another from another great, and you just kind of morphed it together and you got Barkley.
Yeah. So I would be okay. And he can do everything. So I'd be totally okay if they got rid of Jordan Howard, if they could add Saquon Barkley, but that's not going to happen because he's going to go number 1 overall to the Browns, and wisely so.
I will be so mad at Cleveland if they find a way to screw him up. If that just garbage excuse of a franchise finds a way to screw him up, I'll just be pissed about that. I'm not even a Browns fan.
I'm not you know what? I sort of am a Browns fan because they had the same exact uniforms that I had when I played high school football.
Really?
Yes. I played for Allen B. Shepherd high school football, and we had the Cleveland Browns uniforms.
My condolences.
Yeah. So my high school's colors were brown and orange.
Ooh. Did you have the helmet logo?
No, we had ours said Astros, but other than that, it was the exact same uniform. So
wait, like the Houston Astros?
We were the Shepherd Astros because we were named after Alan B. Shepherd, the astronaut that peed his spacesuit.
Ah,
yeah. So
it's almost like taking the Browns to the Super Bowl, but a little different.
But going back to Bears, is Mike Glennon apparently cannot be cut until the league year starts. So he'll be cut March 14th will be the day he's cut. It's already announced. They already told him it's official. He's going to be gone. They've now officially parted ways with Pernell McPhee, Josh Sitton, Quentin Demps, Willie Young, and Jarrell Freeman.
They're not messing around here. They're cutting all the dead weight away. And unfortunately, in some of the cases, you had guys that started off well and then got injured, or you just had guys that were flat out injured because when they had Pernell McPhee, when he started with the Bears, he looked really good, but he just could not stay healthy for the life of him.
And Willie Young is a guy that I would love to have back just because he doesn't make that much. Especially since you have all this cap room, but he's out with a tricep injury. And if you remember, is Charles Tillman never recovered from his torn tricep.
No,
I mean, that's the actually injury. He had it multiple times, but it was the one he finally retired from, just couldn't get healthy from it. So I just see that with Willie Young, parting ways with him because I don't think he's ever going to be 100% again. 100% football wise.
And you know what? They got several good years out of him. I really liked him. I mean, remember his first year in 2014? He was one of the few bright spots on that team.
Yeah, absolutely.
He had 10 sacks that year.
So right now, do you know who the oldest player on the Chicago Bears roster is?
Don't tell me. I could guess. Is it Mike Nugent? Is he even on the roster?
He's not on the
roster.
roster.
Is it Akeem Hicks?
No.
I feel like I'm missing somebody key here. Pat O'Donnell?
No.
Don't tell me.
Kyle Long.
Kyle Long. Wow.
29 years old, is the oldest player on the roster.
So there's currently nobody above 30 right now.
Nope.
Wow.
So yeah, you have a roster where your oldest guy is 29. You have, after assuming you cut Marcus Cooper and Marcus Wheaton, you'll have like $90 million in cap space. So there's a lot of things you can do.
Yeah, I mean, don't they have, well, projected when Glennon is officially cut, it's going to be somewhere around 80, right? Before you even cut those two guys.
Yeah, they have basically enough money to do anything they want to do. Anything they want to do.
Which is a wonderful thing, because what I've said about the Bears is this is how I see this team being built to the top. The key centerpieces of your team, the most important guys, are going to be through the draft. The money, the free agent, that's going to be on depth, small holes to fill. Those are going to be kind of your two top things right there. And you know what? You could create some nice balance here. You could get the top young talent you think is going to fit through the draft. And then the Bears have lacked depth for so long. You have so much money to build depth and fill some holes here or there. That's such a good thing to have. I look at all the money the Bears have, and I rub my hands together knowing that we're not going to be pressed for a cap and that we could go out and spend in any area we want.
And, you know, I've been nervous because their two starting cornerbacks from last year are now free agents, unrestricted free agents in Prince Amukamara and Kyle Fuller. And I started to do a little research more on it, and I'm a little less worried about it because, one, they've got the number 8 overall pick. They're going to be able to get the best corner in the draft and easily be able to, because I think the Minka Fitzpatrick will be possibly the only defensive back taken by them, but before they pick, but he's projected as a safety. But also because there's a lot of top cornerbacks or quality cornerbacks in the free agent class. So I have a feeling, I was thinking the Bears need to franchise Kyle Fuller, but I have a feeling that they don't want to, because if they do franchise him, which is like $15 or $16 million for this coming year, that becomes the starting point for negotiations for signing him long-term deal. But I also think that they sort of need, they've been preaching under the Ryan Pace era that they only really want to give big contracts out to players that have earned it and that they drafted. And I know it wasn't his draft pick, but Kyle Fuller was brought here as a first-round pick, and he played really well last year. I think he's the first quintessential guy that you need to reward.
Yeah, I think that's been kind of a big topic of conversation too. So I think that's going to be one of the first things they're thinking about right now once they get all these cuts done.
So, I mean, there's EJ Gaines, Tremaine Johnson, Aaron Colvin, Brashad Brayland, Rashawn Melvin, Kyle Fuller, Patrick Robinson, Malcolm Butler, Prince Amukamara that are all available. And Prince Amukamara, he's a good cornerback, but Vontae Davis is a similar type, level of caliber of player, and he just signed a 1-year, $5 million contract. So I really think the Bears can get this done with bringing them both back, or even upgrading over Prince Amukamara, and I think that they're going to be solid there. Now, wide receiver is a different story. The Bears wide receivers are dreadful. And I know theoretically you should get better because Cam Meredith is going to be back, but it'll be a year when they start playing preseason games, because he got hurt in the preseason. But I don't know how you get better, because Jarvis Landry was franchise tagged. So in theory, you're going to have to pay him a lot of money and trade for him. Sammy Watkins is available, but I don't know if he's a number one. Paul Richardson of Seattle is potential. Albert Wilson, who played for Kansas City under Matt Nagy last year, is available, but I don't know if he's a number one. Marquise Lee from the Jaguars. He's available, but I don't know if he's a number one. Terrell Pryor was a guy I thought could ascend to a number one, but he had a terrible year last year with the Redskins. Mike Wallace from the Ravens is available, but meh. Taylor Gabriel from Atlanta, meh. Jordy Nelson might become available, but he's not the same Jordy Nelson from several years ago. But the two interesting names are, does Dallas cut ties with Dez Bryant? Number one. And number two is Allen Robinson. He was injured last year with a knee injury, but he's a really fantastic wide receiver. And he posted on his Instagram account the other day a picture of him wearing a Cubs jersey.
Yeah, I saw that.
But I mean, he hasn't been franchise tagged yet, but they have until Tuesday afternoon to do so. We're recording this Sunday. So on 3/6 in the afternoon, I think 3:00 Chicago time, they have to franchise tag him. So, but I think they're expected to. So I don't even know if he's going to be available either. So there's just not a lot of options for Ryan Pace other than doing what they did last year and signing several mediocre guys and hoping that as a unit that they're better than, just signing a wide receiver by committee.
Yeah, this really is kind of a tough situation. I mean, again, luckily they have a lot of money to spend, so it's not like they're going to be penny pinching with anything. But I think at the end of the day, you might just have to go out and take some chances via free agency. You got to get something. I mean, that's the end of it. You got to get something. A few of the guys you listed, there were a few that you mentioned and you said probably not sure if they're a number one. And yeah, they're probably not a number one. But the way I see it is right now, like, can you really get any worse than what we had last year? Because last year was, there's no words to describe how bad it was. It was that bad. So you might just have to take some chances here on what you think could possibly be the right fit. Or maybe not necessarily the right fit, but productive enough to improve. I mean, I don't really know what else to say or think about, because you're obviously not going to just draft an all-star wide receiver core from top to bottom. You're going to have to do some of it. You're going to have to fill out some of it via free agency, and you're going to have to do some of it with the draft. But this is tough. This is a tough one to have. Let's see. You said Terrell Pryor was available. Yeah, Terrell Pryor was available. He had a rough year. I mean, he might be someone that the Bears may look at and say he could rebound. Again, it would be taking a chance, but he might be someone they're considering. You got to fill in somehow. And I know, isn't Cam Meredith technically a free agent too?
Yep, he's a free agent, but he's a restricted free agent.
Oh, okay.
So he'll be back. I'm not worried about that. He'll be back. It's just, what's he going to be? What's he going to look like? And I mean, I know he'll be healthy, but structurally, like, I'm not worried like he's going to be on the disabled list or the PUP list to start the season or anything. But it's just the quality of play you'll get. You just don't know. So it's you got to have insurance policy, and then you also have Kevin White who on the roster, and you need an insurance policy for him too.
Did you see that picture of him?
Yeah,
in like Hawaii or something.
He looks like a freak. Like I don't know how else to describe it.
He looks like he was from like Wakanda, like he was Black Panther or something. I mean, he was jacked.
Yeah, but too bad these bones are brittle. Too bad you can't pump iron and fix your bones. But the position of concern for me is pass rusher for the Bears. I'm not worried about Leonard Floyd. I think his progression has been nice. Akeem Hicks is definitely going to apply pressure from the middle. But you've gotten rid of Pernell McPhee. You gotten rid of Willie Young. Lamar Houston is already a free agent. Like, who do you have to rush the passer? And the free agent class is pretty lackluster. Here's the big names as far as edge rushers in the draft or in the free agency: Alex Okafor, Coney Ely, Aaron Lynch, Adrian Claiborne, and Derek Shelby.
Yeah, it's not a great crop to select from.
I mean, Coney Ely's an interesting one because he was a really raw guy in the draft a couple years ago, and he's shown signs of improvement. But I think the Bears would be like his third or fourth team since he was drafted, and I think he was only drafted like 4 years ago. So he's an interesting guy because I think he'd be a low cost or like a low risk, high reward type guy. But man, it's rough, and I don't know how else you get the pressure on the quarterback.
And you need guys that can do that. I mean, it's essential. It really is. But this list is...
It's not a good list. And the only other thing I can think of is the Jets cut Muhammad Wilkerson. And that guy is another slight head case. But man, when he wants to play, he is dominant. And if you had, and I know he's an inside guy, but if you had Akeem Hicks and Muhammad Wilkerson wanting to play in the middle, man, you don't really need to go around the edge because you're going to collapse that pocket right up the middle. Because I don't know what you do with, you've got Goldman, Hicks, and Wilkerson's only 28, so it's not like he's over the hill. I would be, if I'm Ryan Pace, I'm hard pressed to not at least kick the tires on a Muhammad Wilkerson.
Yeah, I know those quote head case kind of experiments haven't worked, but they've also gone after head cases that weren't as good as him per se. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that really. I mean, hey, a change in coach, a change in environment, an environment that Nagy could create, maybe you could get production out of him potentially, and you wouldn't worry about the head casiness as much. So it's like with the wide receivers, you're going to need somebody. You're going to just have to need somebody. We could always get Julius Peppers. He's only 38.
Yeah, but he's still like, you want to speak about somebody that looks like they're from Wakanda.
He's built. He's built great.
Yeah, he looks like, there's guys that are going in the draft right now. They're like, man, I wish I looked like 38-year-old Julius Peppers.
Yeah.
But speaking of head cases that, man, would love to have as a player, but not have to deal with their head caseness, Aldon Smith.
Oh, I've heard that name come up in talks. Yeah.
Have you seen what happened today?
Today? No.
He is currently on the lam. The police have a warrant for his arrest for he beat up his fiance. And so now he's on the run from the police currently.
Oh. Eek. That's not good.
No, especially after all the issues he has had. Like, I mean, it was already like you didn't want to touch him with a 4-foot pole, but now I think it's like a 73-foot pole.
Yeah, no thanks. No thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, man, he's so good. And you put him back with, his former head coach or his former defensive coordinator that made him a Pro Bowler. I was like, man, it might be worth the risk. And then this popped up, and I was like, nope.
Yeah, no, don't even consider it at this point. After hearing that, no thanks. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. I was actually getting ready to come up here and get my computer set up for the record, and I quickly looked at NFL rumors, and I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Really?
Yeah, that's awful. I've been so busy. Speaking of head cases, and this is going back to basketball really quick. I'm still entertained by the fact that J.R. Smith threw some soup at somebody.
He what?
You didn't hear about that?
Oh yeah. Sorry, it was his coach. It was his coach.
Yeah, one of the assistant coaches. He threw like chicken tortilla soup at him.
So dumb. Why do people do dumb things?
I don't know. I have stopped trying to understand the mind of J.R. Smith, and when I saw that headline the other day, all I could do was just ask, well, was the soup any good? What kind of soup was it? Was it good soup?
Yeah, he just oh well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So I think that might be it for the Bears.
Oh, we do have a question to address really quick before we move.
Yeah. If you want to address that quick.
Yeah. So one of our listeners, Alex, asked us on Twitter, after watching the past couple days of the Combine, if feeling it is best in the first guard out of Notre Dame, shoring up the O-line would be ready to start rookie, would be essential to the RPO success. What are your thoughts on said player?
It was Quentin Nelson, right?
Just said the guard out of Notre Dame, so I would assume so.
Quentin Nelson, he's good. He's real good. I mean, I watched tape of him, and he's just a phenomenal football player. He's an absolute road grader, but usually those type of guys, when you have like a road grader type guy, you lose the ability to rush to defend against the pass rush, and he doesn't. I mean, he's not the most nimble of pass rush or rush defense. He's not the best as far as pass rush, blocking, but he's definitely still really good. He's above average. He's so good at run blocking that it kind of overshadows it. I love him, and I think he's going to be a top 10 pick by any stretch. But the problem is that I think he's going to be gone by the Bears time the Bears draft him.
Yeah, because I've seen some mock drafts of him going like right before the Bears, and the Bears are in the spot where you know exactly what they need, but when it comes to the first round, there are definitely areas where you think they will address more than others, and areas you can make multiple arguments for. You could say secondary, you could say the line. I know a lot of people have talked wide receiver because it's such a big topic, though, based on what has been seen with the wide receiver, the value in the wide receivers, it might not be best to go at that high in the draft. So, I mean, I definitely see the Bears trying their best to get someone for the offensive line because it is a big, big need right now. But like you said, and what I've seen on mock drafts is I'm not sure he's going to be available or not.
Yeah, I was sort of fumbling around because I was trying to talk and pull up my notes because I actually I looked over the guard/centers of the draft for this episode, and I was pulling out my notes on Quentin Nelson. So to give my draft analysis of him, Quentin Nelson, guard, Notre Dame, 6'5", 329. The guy is built like a tank. I mean, you look at him and you go, that's an NFL guard right there. But he's not fat. He's just like built like a solid tank. He's a road grader guy that any running back's going to want to run behind. He's a solid enough blocking guard, which is rare for a road grader. He'll be able to immediately step in and be a day one starter on pretty much any team in the league. He keeps his hands inside, so you're not going to see a lot of holding penalties. He's fundamentally really sound. The only cons I had on him is he's going to struggle a little bit against slants and others and stunts and other quick inside moves. He's not really a good pulling guard because he's got a slow, awkward first step. But, I mean, he's really good. I mean, he might even be like Larry Allen good. If he goes outside the top 10, I'm going to just absolutely be shocked. In fact, if he goes outside the top 10, I'm going to eat my shoe. My shoe, not manure.
Well, I'm going to hold you to that. You know that, right? I'm going to hold you to that. And you're going to have to eat your shoe while talking on our next show that after the draft. And you're going to have to video it.
Okay, I will. But here's the thing. He's really good. And I would love to have him on the team. But there's a lot of good guards in this draft. I was kind of looking through and I hadn't really had a lot of exposure to some of the guards in the draft. I didn't watch as much college football this year before watching game film. But when I started watching them, there's some really good players as far as guard center. And then the thing is, the Bears need one or the other because they've got Cody Whitehair, and they could, if they get somebody who's strictly a center, you move Cody Whitehair over to guard. But if you get somebody that's a really good guard, you could leave Cody Whitehair at center. So you've got a little bit of flexibility there. And one guy I took a look at was Billy Price out of Ohio State, 6'4", 312. I don't know what he benched at the combine, but this guy is absolutely ridiculously strong. I mean, I watched him, a defensive tackle came in and he took one hand and shoved the guy and dropped him to the ground. It was unreal. And he's not just like weight room strong, but this guy is like ripped fence post out with his bare hands strong. He was a pulling as a center. He was athletic enough to pull. So he was able to quickly enough snap the ball and make a move to pull and still make his block, which is really quick. He was quick off the snap, was able to get to the second level, like the linebackers, and block them with just lightning quickness. And he comes from a winning program that played big time competition at Ohio State. Only thing about him is he's a little bit of a lunger. So you'll see him lunge where he expects the defensive player to be, which is fine against big ogres, but against a guy like Aaron Donald, you're gonna ghost, you're gonna Olay him more times than not. Against those kind of guys, he's gonna get his quarterback killed. Also, I really want to know what his arm measurement is at. He has some big concerns about his footwork as well, and he'll stand upright too much because a guy as strong as him shouldn't give shoved back as much as he did. But he's a really intriguing guy, and I love the way he plays. He has speed and athleticism to play left tackle, but I think his arms are too short to play left tackle. So I think he's going to be a guard or center, and I think in a Matt Nagy system, I think he could really thrive.
Yeah, this is a really good draft. If you want to rebuild your offensive line, this is the one to do it.
I mean, I'm not sold on the tackles in the draft, but the interior linemen, it's good. There's another guy who I loved watching, and I didn't know anything about him until I started watching tape, is Will Hernandez from UTEP, 6'2", 348. This guy is an absolute monster. For a guy his size, it's crazy. He's a knee bender as well, which is great. He's not a waist bender. He keeps a solid base, moves his feet fairly well, and when he comes off the snap, he just delivers a powerful blow. He is mean and he's nasty and he's got incredible work ethic. The problem with him is he's another short arm guy. And the problem with short arm guys is it leads to some problems because they almost immediately go body to body with the defender. And that's a way that defenders will shed the blocks. He can be a bit too aggressive as well. You'll see him get a lot of hands to the face and holding calls because he's just so aggressive. But this guy's an intriguing guy because he basically screams Richie Incognito to me, and not in the saying the N-word way, but in the being a really good guard way. Again, this is a really good player in the right system. I think he really thrives, and I think he's got good enough footwork to offset the issue with his short arms. It was just watching, a bobcat run through the defensive line. He just smashing everybody. It was great. Other guy was Sean Welsh, 6'2", 300 pounds out of Iowa. He's a solid base, decent athlete for his size. He worked well within the double teams and knowing his blocking scheme, but he really wasn't athletic enough to overcome his lack of raw power. He grabbed the jerseys way too much. He's really undersized at 6'2", 300. I'm really not that impressed with him. And it's kind of funny is I started watching Iowa tape and I was like, man, this guy really sucks, until I realized I was watching the wrong guard.
Nice.
I had the wrong number. And so I watched the other guy and I was like, I'm still not that impressed. He's not really that special to me. And I think he'll struggle against athletic defensive linemen. I think ultimately he's going to be a center, just not based on his size and lack of power. Another interesting name for me is Frank Ragnow, 6'4", 307 out of Arkansas. This guy played against big-time competition in the SEC. Good size strength for the position. His time from his snap to his first blocking step was really solid, and he's a tough competitor. Not really athletic. Kind of ended up falling on the ground a bit too much. He's going to need to improve his footwork a little bit, but this guy is going to be, he's a center, plain and simple. He's not a guard, he's a center. But the good news is he's got all the tools to be a starting center in this league. Scheme diverse, he can play in any kind of offensive scheme, and he's apparently a really good locker room leader. And those two factors are going to go a long way. Those are the guard centers I look at, and there's some solid ones. And I think the good news is if Quentin Nelson is gone by the time they get there and they want to draft somebody in that position, they're going to have a lot of choices in the first couple rounds.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is they're going to address that at some point in the draft. I don't know if it's going to be the first round or the second round, but by the time training camp starts for the Bears, you're going to see some fresh, young offensive linemen out there, ones that they plan to be part of, when everything comes together. So be excited for that, I guess, depending on who it is. But there's going to be, like you said, a lot to choose from.
So do you want to talk really, really briefly about the Blackhawks?
Yeah, because something we said in last week's show ended up being really wrong.
Yeah, go for it.
So we didn't think Ryan Hartman was going to get much, and we didn't want Ryan Hartman to be traded away for nothing unless it was a first-round pick, and we didn't think he was going to get a first-round pick. But here we are. Ryan Hartman has been traded, and they got a first-round pick for him, plus a 22-year-old Swedish forward prospect who is like giant. This kid is huge. So, wow, we were wrong about that one.
Yeah, we really were. I didn't think a guy who was going to be a restricted free agent would draw that kind of trade, but kudos to the Blackhawks for pulling that off.
And I know people were upset about it, and I'm thinking, I'm happy as heck. This is a struggling kid with not a lot of speed who may have potential, but right now just doesn't seem like a good fit for the future on this team. And say, hey, if you could get a first round pick with this, I mean, that'd be pretty great. And they did. Granted, it's Nashville, so it's going to be a late first round pick, most likely. But a first round pick in hockey is a first round pick. And if you look at what their draft is going to look like this coming year, you'll have 2 first round picks. And when you think about it, it's amazing to see them having 2 first round picks because they had several recent years where they didn't have any. And their 1 first round pick last year was their first round, their 1 first round pick in like 3 years. So you'll have 2 first round picks. You won't have any second rounders because you traded that away for Weiss and Fleischman. You'll have a 3rd round pick. Then you got some
2
picks
3rd round picks. You got 2.
Yeah, you'll have 2.
2 thirds, 2 fourths, 2 fifths, a 6th, and a 7th. So you got a lot of picks.
Yeah, because we made that trade with Washington. That's where we got the other 3rd rounder. And then you got the Columbus one in the 5th round for the Panarin trade. So, yeah. And
not only that is they potentially could have like $15 or $16 million in cap room to spend. So, yeah, I mean, really what I want to talk about the Blackhawks is because this season's
today's game. Ooh.
Yeah. So it's but the window is not necessarily closed because you do still have Crawford coming back next year. You'll still have Kane and Taves. You still have got some young players that you're excited about. You're going to have money to be able to be a legitimate player in the free agent game. And you got a lot of draft picks. So there's actually room to be cautiously excited.
My biggest concern when it comes to salary cap, when it comes to the team of the future, it's Keith and Seabrook. You're going to be stuck with that. And I hate talking bad about those two because of all the good things they've done. But it's pretty obvious. Those days are behind them. They are getting old. They have so many miles on them. And you're stuck with those contracts. I don't see anyone wanting to take any of that. That's my biggest concern.
But what if you're able to, I mean, you're not going to be able to move on from their contracts, but what if you're able to push them down in their defensive pairing, push it down to the 2nd or 3rd pairing and bring in a legit top 4 defenseman and then put some of the younger guys ahead of them. So Keith and Seabrook are playing a lot less minutes.
Well, I mean, that would be ideal. It's just how you're going to get to that because, yeah, they're going to draft some guys and they drafted a defenseman in the 1st round last year, but they're going to be a ways away from the NHL.
I don't know. I think he's going to be closer than you think. So it'll be interesting to see where, what is his name? Henry I can't pronounce his.
I still can't pronounce his name. I'll get it eventually.
I was at the draft and I was like, I turned to my wife. I was like, I can't pronounce his name.
Where's he playing at right now? What level is he at? I know he's on Rockford.
Yeah, but he's playing overseas still.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I thought.
But you've actually got some good things going for you. That you can, I don't know. I mean, the future is not bleak yet.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely areas of hope for sure. Like, I think Saad, I still think he's going to bounce back. And you look at his year, and he's had some really tough luck at times. And can you be mad at him for not getting as many points when people aren't scoring on his line as well? I mean, it's hard to rack up points when that line isn't scoring, period. I know you wish he had some more goals, but again, he's had some really tough luck. So I still think he'll be around. What I wanted to discuss with you is Jonathan Toews. What do you think his future has in store? Because I have a few thoughts I want to toss out with Jonathan Toews, who is still my favorite hockey player in all of hockey.
I don't know what's wrong with Toews, and I mean he's still not an old guy. He's got a lot of miles left on him, and you can't say it's too much ice time of is from playing a long season plus a long playoff season, because they haven't had that in several years. I just don't know what's happening with him, and people are saying, well, it's Sod's not playing well to lift to boost up Toews, but Toews should be the one that's boosting the other guys on the line. So
Right.
I can't really say.
Well, you brought up his age and you brought up his history. One thing that I was talking to somebody on Twitter about this, and what sometimes worries me is he's taken a beating over the years. He's had concussions. He's had some back issues. And there are times where I honestly wonder how he physically feels. I don't think he's like in as much pain where he can't bear, but you kind of can't help but wonder. I mean, yeah, the past 2 years, there haven't been deep playoff runs, but think from 2009 to 2015, all those deep playoff runs, playing against physical teams where he just gotten beaten down, and, the concussions. I can't help but wonder if there's something physically wrong, or just, I do think part of it definitely is the fact that his style of play, his finesse style of play, it's just been counter adjusted to because the sport is ever evolving. It's a very speed driven game. And I feel like teams have just kind of adjusted their way around Jonathan Toews partially. But I also can't help but wonder what his physical stature is like, and if it's taken any kind of toll.
It's possible. Does he rebound physically?
I mean, he's in good he looks like he's in good shape, and he talks about whatever he drinks, or whatever supplements, or I don't know what he's doing exactly, but he was talking about the special things he's been doing. But
he's saying he's taking his vitamins, saying his prayers like a good little Hulkamaniac.
Something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, you think about it. He was never a physical player, and if you are a physical player and you got your hands on him, I mean, face it, you've seen him get tossed, despite his talent and how good he was. Let's face it, there have been times where he's just been tossed around like a rag doll out there after all those years,
Yeah.
So that's my concern with him. It's never talent, because he has all the talent in the world. The guy's a winner, but I just think all those years have taken such a beating, it might affect him.
Hope not. I hope that it's not a permanent thing. I really hope
I sure hope not either.
I mean, it would suck for the Hawks on multiple levels, but and you just hope that come next season he comes back, he's healthy, he's ready to play, because it can't be Kane the only one playing well for the team. It just can't.
That's another thing I wanted to bring up quickly with you is when you think about Patrick Kane's performance this year, how would you classify it? Because a lot of people are saying, and I'm not going to get into the stats until after I hear your opinion. A lot of people are saying, oh, but there's still a really big drop with him. There's this and that. I mean, if you've watched the Blackhawks this year and you have a perception on Kane, what is yours personally?
Honestly, I mean, I haven't backed it up with any stats, but just by eyeball test, he played great. There's been some times where he didn't finish, puck luck misses, hitting iron. But as of late, it feels like the whole team quit a little bit up until the last game, or not the last game, game before last. And he's just, it seems like he's not putting 100% effort in But I don't know, as a whole on the season, I thought it was a good season for him, but I don't have any stats to back that up, and I haven't really looked at them.
Yeah, so I'm looking it up right now, and a lot of the points of what people are trying to make is that he's dropping because he doesn't have Panarin with him, and we all know there's no question that Panarin and him had amazing chemistry. He's flat out said he misses Panarin, and I understand that he misses Panarin. His two best statistical years were when Panarin was on the team, though his MVP year in 2016, was Panarin a factor? Yeah, but 46 goals, 106 points. A lot of that was just him having a really dang good year. Now, if you look at this year, you can say, oh, there's a huge drop-off. Well, right now as it stands, through 65 games, he has 24 goals, 38 assists, 62 points. If you look before his MVP year, he was averaging about 25 to 28 goals a year. He passed 30 goals or equaled 30 goals once in their first Cup year in 2010. So if you take his current 24 goals, 62 points, and you look at pretty much his career averages, he's going to have a pretty typical Kane year. Is it going to be down compared to his MVP year? God, yeah. I mean, he was 27 in his MVP year. I think we could all safely say that was his top peak year. That was the top right there. But he's still going to have a pretty typical Kane year when you look at it for the most part over his career. And don't look at plus minus, okay? Plus minus is a garbage stat, and this team is garbage defensively. Plus minus really has no importance with him.
While we were on him, I pulled up the Henry Jokaharju. He's playing in the WHL right now and apparently dominating. And he just came off the World Junior Championships. And apparently he just looked dominant in the World Junior Championships. So here's to that. I mean, here's what I'm reading about him. Defenseman finished tied for second on the team with 4 points in 5 games. And they said he looks like an elite defenseman prospect. And according to Second City Hockey, the last time the Blackhawks had a blue line prospect as good as him in their system was before I started covering hockey.
Wow.
So, he's young.
That's good.
So I don't, maybe they bring him up next year, but he'll be there for training camp, and we'll see how he plays in the there and going forward. But maybe he's in Rockford next year for part of the season. But if he's good, they're going to have to play him because they don't have a lot of other talent, and they're going to have to mask old Seabrook and old Keith.
Right. Yeah.
All right, let's move over and wrap this up with a little bit of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk White Sox. So I mean, we're gonna use a Cubs talk to transition to White Sox, but there was a Wall Street Journal article this week that basically said that Theo Epstein and the Cubs have become masters of the art of the pitch on free agents. And you think about it and you're like, well, they kind of are. I mean, they sure, nobody's going to get every single free agent that they want, but between the young team that's still World Series competitive, the fact that it's a big market team, a big face team, but it's a really good organization to play for, and then just their ultimate selling points of plus Theo doesn't really go after a lot of free agents. There's teams that cast a really wide net of guys that that they might be interested in, and they get feelers back to see who might be interested in them, and then start talking to a lot of people. But Theo really focuses on a handful of guys that he's interested in. And so guys he's talking to, they know that the Cubs are serious in their interest. It's not a, well, let's see what he wants. Oh, it's too much, man. Let's just go on somebody else. So that's not a surprising thing, but it kind of leads me into, when it comes time, are the White Sox going to be able to do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it is going to depend on how well the White Sox are doing, because if they're a force to be reckoned with, then the willingness for a player to go there is going to improve. But, you know, that's going to be a big factor of it. I think Rick Hahn is definitely a guy you could trust to be that kind of negotiator. Rick Hahn is incredibly intelligent. And I think it's a shame that he spent so many years being behind Kenny Williams and Jerry Reinsdorf, because you're seeing his smarts come out now. So I think that they very well can master that, though I think there is more to it, obviously. I don't see why they couldn't, unless for some reason things weren't working, like the rebuild wasn't working, but I don't think that that's going to be the case here, really. So, no, I could see them being able to do it. The one disadvantage that the White Sox do have is, and you know, I'm not trying to make this a Cubs White Sox hate, you know, rivalry thing on here, but the fact of the matter is the White Sox don't have the financial flexibility the Cubs do. So that's a little bit of advantage the Cubs do have. But there are many other aspects that I would think that Rick Hahn would be able to emphasize on to recruit players to the White Sox. Because if they're going to be as good as we think they're going to be, the players are going to want to play for them.
I mean, you know, simplifying this a little too much, but once you've committed to a full scale rebuild in baseball, now is first step is acquiring as many assets as you can get. Step 2 is developing those assets. 3, keeping them healthy. And then 4 is when it comes time to be able to bring in those key free agents to help you get over the top. That, I mean, in a simplistic way, it's where we're at, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Rick Hahn has just crushed it as far as the first one, bringing in a lot of talent. Rick Hahn has just absolutely been great at that. And it's not just stockpiling, like Cubs stockpiled a lot of bats, and the Mets stockpiled a lot of arms, and the White Sox got both. They've got arms, they've got bats, they've got everybody that they could need. And you're seeing the development, because you're already starting to see guys start to matriculate up into the major league roster. So you're seeing the development there, which is great. But the last 2 ones are you don't know. Can they keep guys healthy? You've already got Jake Berger with a ruptured Achilles.
Yeah, that's a tough break for them.
That's a real tough one. And you've got Adolfo, who's he's not going to be able to play the field because of a shoulder injury, and possibly can bat. So you've already started to get, and you've got Rodon, who, you know, who knows what's going on with that shoulder of his. So you've already starting to get some significant injuries of your guys, and that's a huge concern of how your rebuild's going to go, because you need, I mean, granted, it's not, you know, these aren't your 3 top guys, but still you need to make sure that you have the health of your young players going forward, because you got to hit on a good percentage of these to compete for a World Series.
Yeah, I think the biggest injury concern right now they have would probably be Carlos Rodon because he hasn't stayed healthy in a long time. And, I'll be honest with you, I think that they kind of mismanaged him. I mean, before Rick Hahn came around, the White Sox mismanaged many prospects over the past decade, and you've seen some bad things there. And Rodon still can come around and be really good because he has the stuff. He just has to stay healthy. But if he doesn't, you could put a lot of responsibility on the White Sox for kind of mismanaging him. And same with Carson Fulmer as well. But, with the new mindset that they have, I think that they could acknowledge the fact that they know they got to develop these guys better. And I think they are starting to do that. I think they're weeding out all the old, even though not all the personnel is gone, they're weeding out a lot of the old ways of the way these handled prospects over the years because it wasn't working. So that's a big step. The Cubs did the same thing. I mean, the Cubs were terrible with prospects before Theo Epstein came around, and they fixed that. And that's what the White Sox are trying to do now. Here's something that somebody brought up was interesting. If there is one concern that I'd have about a rebuild like this, it's with the arms. I'm not too worried about Eloy Jimenez. I'm not worried about Yoan Moncada because, frankly, I think those two are going to be absolute monsters, and I can't see them not being monsters. But if there was an area of more concern I'd have, and this is not trying to play Debbie Downer, it's legitimate because we've seen it in baseball. It's some of their pitchers. And do you have any idea where I'm going with this? If you had to guess.
Yes.
A lot of these guys, like Michael Kopech, Lopez, I mean, Michael Kopech looks incredible. And if he works out, he could just be unreal. The scary thing that I'd have is when you're a guy who throws hard like that, you worry about your arm just completely getting blown out. And unfortunately, we've seen that happen with the Mets, where that rotation can't stay healthy, even though they have all the talent in the world. I'm not saying it's going to happen to the White Sox. I'm not. But it would be something, if I were a diehard Sox fan, that I would worry about a little bit. Just being completely honest.
I remember many moons ago, Mark Pryor was a guy that we were never supposed to worry about injuries because he had such good mechanics, and that guy was nothing but injuries. And think about it, is that there was a time where we had, and if you could go back in time and not have vision of the future, and you're like, you have Mark Pryor, Kerry Wood, and
Carlos Zambrano when he was young too at the time.
Carlos Zambrano is your third, and Greg Maddux. You had all four of those on your team at the same time, and you're like, man, that team is going to be good. When Greg Maddux is your fourth starter, and granted, it was old Greg Maddux, but still, and the wheels just came off of that train mostly because of injury.
Right. And again, this is not us saying we think it's going to happen to the White Sox. It's just, it's always something you got to be concerned about. The good thing with them is since they have such an embarrassment of riches, if just one of them, like God forbid, something happens to one of them, you still got several other top pitching prospects. You have such an embarrassment of riches where some injuries and some busts will be compensated because you have so many riches. So that's a really good thing for the White Sox right there. This kind of gets into the topic of conversation that Theo Epstein had about trying to center your rebuild just on a rotation and why that's not a good idea. The Cubs didn't do it at all. The White Sox are getting a bunch of pitching prospects, but that's not their key focus. They have a balance of both, which is a really good thing. But again, I'm going to reference the Mets. When you take their approach, that's really risky. When you're not grooming a lot of position players like the Cubs did and the White Sox are.
I mean, look where the Mets are at. That's a team. Sure, they went to the World Series, they lost, and they have just bottomed out since then. Partially because of injuries, partially because they can't hit they can't hit for and score runs. It's just been a bad situation for the Mets, and they still have good arms. It just can't put it all together.
I mean, I said it once and I've said it again. Noah Syndergaard is an absolute treasure of talent when it comes to pitching. He is so good. You look at his 2016 season, and he wasn't able to reach 200 innings, because he had the concerns with him, but that was the year he made 30 plus starts. I mean, he had a 2.60 ERA, a 2.29 FIP, and a home run per 9 of 0.5, a strikeouts per 9 of 10.7. I mean, he has all the talent in the world, and he did that at 23 years old. But last year, he got off to a fantastic start again. A FIP of 1.31. 1.31 was his FIP. And then he got hurt. It was tough to watch.
Yeah, that's the problem. Young arms is they could be super good. It's keeping them healthy. I mean, part of the reason people are worried about Jake Arrieta is because he's never really been majorly hurt.
They were talking about that on the radio the other day. A lot of people are hesitant because he never had his Tommy John yet.
Yep. And it takes, once you come back from Tommy John, sure, you can, that next, in a year, you can be throwing, but it takes a couple of seasons for you to come back to full form. And if you sign Jake Arrieta at this point and he gets Tommy John, it might be the end of the road.
Yeah, I know. That's a huge area of concern right there, and that's why it's kind of hard for him right now to find a job.
But one last thing I want to bring up with the White Sox is we were talking with my friend Gary when he was on about who would be the starters for the White Sox come opening day, and really there's some holes in that outfield. But the rumors are that the White Sox are talking with Mike Moustakas and Carlos Gonzalez. And this absolute weird off season, the cold stove league, it might end up benefiting the White Sox because these are guys that, in years past would have probably signed stupid contracts that they weren't worth. And now we're in almost a full week into March, and most of the top free agents were still available. I mean, I get that this is a perfect storm of not the best crop of free agents and the age of the free agents, but still, and
who's going to be free agents next year?
Yeah, so the White Sox really could benefit from either one of those guys adding them to the roster and not break the bank.
If you want my opinion, I think Carlos Gonzalez would be the one I'd rather go after. I know it sounds a little crazy, but I just feel like he'd be a better fit there than Mike Moustakas.
I mean, Mike Moustakas he's got some really good numbers.
Because he had a pretty good year last year. I know that. I'm just trying to pull him up now. He is younger than Gonzalez, and last year, 272, 314, 521, 30, a career high 38 home runs. That was really the big eye-popping stat from last year. And I guess, hey, playing in that ballpark at U.S. Cellular Field would be pretty good, and the White Sox could stop watching him destroy their pitching like he's done for so many years. But I feel like Gonzalez probably fills a more needier hole, even if Mike Moustakas may end up putting up some pretty good numbers and is younger. I don't see them getting both, but hey, maybe they get one of them.
Yeah, I mean, he's a solid bat, solid player. He's got some veteran experience. I think he could be very helpful for a young team that is pretty much looks up to Abreu as their one elder statesman.
Yeah, I mean, Abreu is a great guy to have, but it's probably beneficial to have more than one, you would think.
I don't know. It's just, I think they're going to see how it plays out. And if those guys don't have jobs soon, the White Sox could throw a very team friendly offer out there. And one of those guys is going to bite.
Yeah. I mean, you don't really hear much of them in their respective teams from last year. I mean, I know a lot of people thought that he's going to go back to the Royals, Mike Moustakas, that is, but who knows at this point. And Cargo's
not going back. So who knows who would sign him? I don't know what his options are. There's not a lot of options for him.
Yeah, and I know he's coming off a quote down year, but 262, 339. Though, I do have to look at his splits, because anyone in Colorado, you got to look at their splits. While I do that, can I just mention something really weird I heard on the radio talking about splits?
Sure.
This was last week. This was on ESPN 1000 with Murph and Fred. Murph suggested the fact that the Cubs should bring back DJ LeMahieu when he's a free agent. And I don't know what to say. That just sounds crazy. I just kind of wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
Why? I don't get it.
You know, his stats away from Coors Field are nothing special whatsoever. I just kind of wanted to bring that up and see what your reaction was.
I don't. No.
Well, here's Cargo's numbers away from Coors Field. First, I'll give you Coors Field. 323, 383, 593. Away, 252, 308, 427. That's a pretty significant difference. But also keep in mind, if you got Cargo at US Cellular Field, it may not be Coors Field, but that is a damn good hitter's park. So if you wanted to go that route and fill gaps in the outfield, then there you go. I think your infield is pretty set for the future, at least for now. But, Mike Moustakas, like you said, if he doesn't have a significant offer, that might not be bad to go after either. I feel like at the end of the day, though, Carlos Gonzalez is probably more desperate for a job than Mike Moustakas will be, because I think Mike Moustakas will probably be the first one to land somewhere, whether it's the White Sox, the Royals, or someone else. So that'll be interesting to see. So just a few things to kind of weigh here when it comes to that.
But moving to the Cubs really quickly, the only point I want to bring up, and if there's something else you want to bring up, we can talk about it, but the only thing I had on mind was Jason Hayward. And every part of me just hopes he can bounce back to what he was prior to signing with the Cubs, because he would be awesome to lead off. We talked about it before, his base running acumen, and actually, I just think he would be the great leadoff hitter with his on-base percentage and of his earlier years and his base running acumen. But an article from The Athletic recently talks about his Jason Hayward's struggles since joining the Cubs have reached the point of historic oddity, as this type of production drop during a player's prime is nearly unprecedented, especially when injuries aren't a factor. Hayward has just a 243, 315, 353 slash line over 1,073 plate appearances for Chicago, as opposed to 268, 353, 431 he posted in 3,429 plate appearances with the Braves and Cardinals over his first 6 seasons. And the article cites a few other players who went through similar sudden early declines, and only former Dodgers and Expos catchers Ron Fairley was able to entirely rebound and become a productive hitter. That's a eye-opening article.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of people were talking about it. And when they got Chili Davis, I kept trying to sell myself, okay, Chili Davis, he's going to fix him. He can fix him. I bet he can fix him. But the more I read into that, and I know spring training doesn't mean much, but from what I've seen, from what he's done, it looks like the same thing. And I want to believe, like you said, that he will regain what he once did. But I'm starting to lean towards we can't count on that anymore. We know he's going to be a Gold Glove fielder, but you looked at last year's batting stats. I mean, they were, in terms of batting average on base, they were average. They weren't terrible, but they weren't outstanding by any means. He has no power, but we kind of already knew that. I just, at this point, I'm not expecting much more than 260, even though I keep trying to tell myself I want to see better, but 260, 320, that might be what we just have to expect now. Maybe we're wrong, but I don't know at this point.
I mean, I would be happy with 260 if we could get that 350 on base percentage.
Oh, for sure. I mean, absolutely. If he draws a few more walks and, maybe sprays the ball a little better like he used to, then sure. I just, I don't know if I would trust him in a leadoff role right off the bat until he can prove he could do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, but at what point do the Cubs say enough is enough and he becomes a late inning defensive replacement and a platoon player?
I think that's if Ian Happ and Albert Almora prove themselves to be better hitters and more productive, I think it's when you see a decent amount of that, that's when you're going to see it, because you still want to make sure that guys like Happ and Almora are going to be productive at the plate. And I think they're going to be. So that might, if you go through the first month or so, Happ is crushing the ball, Almora is crushing the ball, and Hayward is still kind of teetering around where he was last year or the year before, then I think that's when you make that decision.
What if Jason Hayward is doing okay, like not abysmal? He's got, I don't know, let's give him a slash line of, through the first 2 months of the season of, let's say, 255, 330, and 390. So not terrible, not great. But you've got Schwarber hitting bombs and Happ and Almora hitting the ball well. What do you do?
I think you don't go, okay, we're going to reserve him like Austin Jackson in 2015 on the Cubs, like late inning defense, but you probably see him play a little less than what he was originally coming here to do. I mean, when he came here before 2016, he was supposed to be an everyday player. And though he struggled in 2016, he was an everyday player. And last year, for the most part, he was an everyday player. But you'd probably see him play a little less. Not like I said, not like Austin Jackson type late inning defense, but less. That's the only thing I could really think of, because at the end of the day, if Ian Happ and Albert Almora are crushing the ball, you need them in the lineup as much as you can. But you also need Jason Hayward to be in there defensively in key moments. And I know a lot of that sounds like late inning defensive exchanges, but sometimes in a matchup, you want him starting the game. You want to start your Gold Glove outfielder throughout the entire game. It's kind of finding that balance.
I mean, I think it's a good problem to have if you've got Almora, Happ hitting the ball well, and Schwarber rediscovers himself and starts hitting the ball well. Yeah. I think those are all really good problems to have. you can figure out things to do with Jason Hayward. And the leadoff spot is the Cubs really got very, very, very little from the leadoff spot last year and made it to the NLCS. So,
yeah, I mean, again, they scored all those runs last year still, and I've said before that leadoff, though a concern, I don't think it's as big of a deal as some people may think, but it is definitely a concern. So, I mean, right now, if you're looking at the leadoff, I'm seeing Ian Happ making a case, but I still am not completely sure that's where he's going to be for the long haul. I think Almora is going to really try to work towards that, because what Ian Happ has to do is in major league games, actual major league games, not spring training games, is that he could have a few more better at bats and strike out less, and then that would really prove yourself worthy. So, there's going to be some experimenting going on here, and sometimes spring training doesn't always tell you everything.
No, not at all. But Happ, for me, is going to have to strike out way less. Sure. And last year, there was a point where he just hit a wall and played. He was hitting great until a certain point, and then just the rest of the season hit poorly.
He was very up and down. He went through stretches where he looked awesome, and then he looked stretches where we thought, okay, you got to send him down. He is completely lost. Because I remember seeing a game where he crushed the ball to all fields, and he looked great. And then I was at a game where he got a golden sombrero. So you saw the two extremes there.
And I can't remember. I think Tony might be paraphrasing something Tony Gwynn said, but something along the lines of, every single baseball player will go through a slump. It's just the nature of baseball. And what separates the good hitters from the not good hitters is how quickly you overcome the slump and how long between the slumps. And so you saw a slump with Happ, but it was a struggle to come out of it, and he really didn't come out of it until now. He's starting to hit. Same with Schwarber, is that he went into a slump last year, never came out of it. And Almora, at this point, you're really only hitting him against pitchers from they have him pitching or playing against only certain pitchers. So he's not going to be facing, he's not going to be an everyday starter. So you've got a platoon of question marks at this point. And I mean, there's worse problems to have because you've got 4 really talented guys, but you still have a lot of question marks in that outfield.
Yeah, you do. And it's part of the process of what you have when you have a bunch of young people. And it's kind of funny. You're still trying to figure a lot out, even though you've been to 3 NLCS championship series and you've won a World Series. It is kind of a funny situation, but yeah, I mean, you're absolutely all right about that. And that's what makes Hayward tricky, is because even though the bat is such a question mark, you at least know what you're going to get defensively, no matter what. So, and that is of value, and you're going to have that in at some point. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds. And Dexter Fowler, main reason you miss Dexter Fowler is because he was the bona fide leadoff guy. There was never a question of who your leadoff guy was going to be when he was around. So, that was one luxury that we don't have now, which we do miss, even though every other luxury looks as good, if not better, than before.
Yeah, and I mean, you speak about Jason Hayward's defense, you don't worry about that. Honestly, you don't worry about Albert Almora's defense either. And honestly, I don't know if you worry about Ian Happ's defense. I mean, it's a new position for him in the outfield, but the guy's got speed all day and is shown to be decent. Schwarber's the only one you worry about as far as their defensive prowess.
Yeah, what's interesting about Schwarber is that his fielding stats are interesting because when you think of his fielding, you think of just the terrible plays he boots, but when you look at it as a whole, he's not the worst outfielder ever, like some people say he is. He's certainly not good, but I think at best he'll be an average left fielder, but I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I think the big issue for me with his defense is not him running down balls, or it's his poor jump and poor initial read off the bat.
Yes, I agree.
And which leads to he's not a speed guy in the first place. So it makes his range of getting two balls much less than you'd expect. And sure, there's the famous gaffes that he's had. Those aren't the ones I'm concerned about. It's the regular, poor initial reads off the bat. That's my concern. And part of that is he's new to this position. He's been a catcher and he played outfield one season, missed an entire season because of injury. And
in
then
the outfield. No less.
and then came back last year and was, he was struggling at the plate, and that's his focus. So you're not focusing on your defensive play when you're an offensive guy and you're struggling at the plate. So it's just time. It's just going to take time. And you're right. He's never going to be more than an average fielder. But if you can get him to an average fielder, that makes his value much higher because he becomes a positive WAR player rather than being a negative defensive WAR player.
And also, what's interesting to think about Schwarber is, and this is just him in general, not just his defense, but you look at what he did since coming back from AAA last year, you saw some improvements there. So there's a little hope there for you right off the bat. Defense could be very unpredictable on what he's going to do. I mean, like I said, and like what you said, he's never going to be great. But here's a nice thing to have. You have elite defense pretty much everywhere else on that team. So left field, though important, you still have one of the best infields. I mean, you watch Javier Baez play, and that's unbelievable. You have a Gold Glove in right field and very solid glove in center field. So left field is probably the biggest weakness. You could probably argue catcher too defensively, but you look most other places on the Cubs field, and you're pretty set defensively.
Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. But is there anything else you want to bring up with baseball?
Yeah, there's just one last thing I wanted to bring up, and that was the rotation was set. As you saw, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts, and then I wanted to bring up something you kind of already brought up already, but I'll bring it up again. So first, what are your thoughts of the rotation?
I mean, honestly, we talked about it before. There's really no bad way to do it.
Exactly.
I mean, I like the righty lefty, but Lester, Hendricks, then Yu Darvish, then Quintana. If your Quintana is your fourth starter, it's a damn good rotation.
Yeah, it really is. It really, really is. And that's, like, remember what I said on the last show. You could spin a wheel between those top four, and if they picked you for opening day, it would be perfectly fine. You'd be like, okay, that works. We talked about Kerry Wood, Mark Pryor, Greg Maddux, Carlos Zambrano, and the 2004 rotation. And I don't know if you saw it, but I wrote an article for Cubby's Crib talking about what happened in 2004 with that rotation and what we're looking at now, because a lot of people are saying this is the best the Cubs have looked, the rotation-wise, on paper, just on paper, since 2004. The results of this year obviously have to be seen, but if you remember, the hype for 2004 was really big with that rotation. And I basically kind of compared the two, and there were a lot of differences, and many differences were determined when the season was played, but there were also some differences beforehand. I don't know. Did you get a chance to see that at all?
I actually didn't. I saw you posted it, but I haven't had a chance to read it. It's been a hectic week.
Yeah. So what I was looking at was, you look at the average age of this rotation, and there's a bit more balance. Obviously, you have John Lester, who's 34, but you have Jose Quintana and Kyle Hendricks, who are 29. You had Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor, who were either middle age or really young, like Mark Pryor. You also had really young Carlos Zambrano. And then you had Greg Maddux, who was starting to decline. He was 38, and you could see the obvious decline in his last few years on the Cubs. It just wasn't quite the same. You had the extremes of young and pretty old, where this rotation, put as much stock into this as you want, but there's kind of more of an age balance with this one. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about it before with the Mets, is with young arms, you don't know what the injury concerns are going to be. With older arms is, especially if they've already gone through their injuries, you have a better sense of what you're going to get. There's no super young guys on the Cubs roster as far as pitcher. I mean, the starting pitching rotation. There's no super young guys, but everybody's still in that prime window. Whereas 2004, there was a couple guys that weren't yet in their prime, and a guy who way past his prime. So there was nobody in that window, even though you still had a lot of talent. There was just nobody in that prime window where you have more expectations, and you're more confident in those expectations.
Yeah, exactly. So you have pretty much a rotation right now where it's young enough to not be like in their upper 30s like Greg Maddux was, but it's old enough to have plenty of experience and winning experience, what you have in John Lester, what you have in Kyle Hendricks. Say what you will about Yu Darvish and his World Series performance, because it was awful, but I mean, hey, at least he's been there. Jose Quintana was with them last year in their playoff run to the NLCS. So it's just a nice overall balance, and it's also managed very differently. Long story short, Joe Maddon's not Dusty Baker.
He definitely not.
Exactly. Also, here's another interesting point. You look at the 2004 rotation, Mark Pryor, Kerry Wood at the top. You had those guys. Those are your top two guys. Our top two guys in the rotation here, by technicality, it's John Lester, Kyle Hendricks. Both those guys, really darn good pitchers, but they're not the ones that are going to be reaching back and trying to blow you away with smoke. And Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor were much bigger with the strikeouts. And with that, you saw some arm problems eventually, obviously, where Lester is built for durability. Kyle Hendricks is, though he had the hand injury last year, overall, he's built for durability as well with his arm. Same with Jose Quintana. He's been very durable. So you also keep that in mind. Obviously, your biggest injury concern in the rotation right now is Yu Darvish, but he's had his Tommy John surgery and his velocity has gone up, and he's probably going to be the guy who's probably the biggest K guy, I would imagine, if all goes right. But you have your top two guys in Lester and Hendricks who have the ability to strike guys out, but they're not just relying on blowing smoke and reaching back and throwing. They use finesse. They change speeds a lot. So again, take as much stock in this as you want, but there's a little bit of comfort there as well, just based on the pitchers they are.
Who was the fifth starter in 2004? Was it Matt Clement?
Yes, it was. And he had a pretty good year that year.
Yeah, Matt Clement.
But he didn't have the movement and promise that Tyler Chatwood has, I'll tell you that.
No, but hopefully Tyler Chatwood has better facial hair than Matt Clement.
You mean Abe Lincoln?
Are there any other topics you wanted to bring up?
No, that's pretty much it. And like I said, on that last little bit I did on the rotation, take all those things as you will. They might be significant, they might not be, but just a few things I wanted to throw out there. Injuries are very unpredictable, but my overall point is I feel like we can look at this great rotation and not just have to think it could end up like 2004. I mean, obviously anything could happen, but don't draw those fears just yet.
Yeah, no fears. But I think I'm really excited about this year. I think the Cubs were going to see a big bounce back from last year. And last year they went to the NLCS, and I just think that they're gonna the World Series hangover is gone. The hunger to go back is there, and I think the pitching staff is better. And I hope you see some bounce backs on some of the offensive players. So I really am excited about this year.
Oh, I am too. And I think the hangover was a huge effect of it. At first, I really didn't believe in hangovers. But when you look at what the Cubs did all that offseason when they won, they didn't have any downtime. They had none. They were probably exhausted. And you saw the way they just ran out of gas completely by the end there. So, yeah, I think there's going to be more hunger. There's going to be a bit more energy. You've added Yu Darvish. You've added Tyler Chatwood. You've added two really good relievers. That really kind of adds to things, I think. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a very hungry team this year.
But I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody for listening. Please check out social media at Twitter at Swerski Sports and at ShyFanPat1, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please make sure you subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube, or the TuneIn app. And thank you so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like timber New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on the plains.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears